In our first perception of time, the world is incomplete. It is dull and gray, blanketed in an unending fog. Large arch trees barred their roots into the unformed earth, avoiding the crags that dominate the land. This is where the everlasting dragons call home. But one day, in this dreary world, fire appeared and brought with it disparity. Heat and cold, light and dark, and of course, life and death. From the dark, the humanoids came, and within this flame, they found the souls of lords. 3 powerful souls were claimed by the Witch of Izalith, Nito, first of the dead, and Lord Gwyn. A 4th unique soul, the Dark Soul, was found by the progenitor of mankind, the furtive pygmy, so easily forgotten. Through the strength bestowed from these Lord Souls, Lord Gwyn and the others challenged the ancient dragons. Though their power was substantial, the ancient dragons were a resilient foe. So Gwyn petitioned the pygmies to help in their war. Through the power of their dark soul, the pygmies' weapons and armor were forged in darkness, in the abyss, where humanity and the dark soul draws its strength. In fear of this seemingly endless strength, Lord Gwyn cast a seal of fire upon their weapons and armor to contain it and keep it from spreading. The pygmies would mostly be used for cannon fodder in this war, and would receive no recognition for their deeds. Another way for Gwyn to deflect his fear of the dark. So begins Lord Gwyn's manipulation of humanity. The war being waged was fought fiercely by both sides, but the fighting would prove more and more difficult for Lord Gwyn and his armies with each passing battle. For every dragon slain, they lost 70 of their own. Gwyn's luck, however, would soon turn when Seath the Pale Drake turned on his own kind and revealed to Gwyn the secret of the ancient dragon's immortality, their stone scales, and that their weakness to lightning would peel apart these scales. So, Lord Gwyn took on the mantle of the Lord of Sunlight. He and his knights conjured mighty bolts of lightning to hurl at the dragons. It wouldn't be long until the gods had become victorious, and the ancient dragons were no more. This is the start of the Age of Fire, a golden age created by Gwyn upon the dragon's defeat. In this age, most life would begin to flourish. The gods were thriving. They erected grand civilizations. Gwyn created the beautiful Anor Londo, the city of the gods. And things were relatively good. Gwyn granted Seath the Scaleless a piece of his own lord's soul, bestowed a dukedom upon him, and constructed the grand archives in which Seath would retire to and begin his research into immortality. But as we know, all good things must come to an end, and fire cannot burn forever. And soon the flame that illuminated Gwyn's Age of Fire began to fade, and the world teetered on the precipice of an age of darkness. Gwyn feared this dark, now more than ever, and recognized it for what it was. In this age, humanity would flourish, and the pygmies would reign as gods over them, for their soul is made of that very dark. In fear of this impending dark, the gods were desperate for a means to stave it off. The first solution came from the witch of Izalith and her daughters of Chaos. Using a soul, they attempted to recreate the first flame. Somewhere along the lines of playing creator, or perhaps just not being powerful enough, something went wrong, and they instead created an unwieldy fire, the flame of chaos. For all their worth, the witch and her daughters worked hard to keep the flame under control. During this, one of the witch's daughters, Quelana, fled from her duties and from her family. She would return in the far future to feign ablution and pretend to seek answers. But to what end, we do not know. It's hard to determine exactly how long the witch and her daughters were able to contain this flame, but chaos, however, is true to its nature and could not be held at bay forever. Eventually, the would-be restorers of fire were engulfed by their flame of chaos, and with that, all of Izalith. Some of the witch's daughters and followers were disfigured into beasts, into demons. Some were seemingly unscathed, and some were and are missing, though there are certainly rumors as to their whereabouts. As for the witch herself, it's hard to say. Some believe that she herself became the bed of chaos, the only thing left behind in the wake of the cataclysm, and from it, demons were birthed. Some believe the witch was completely consumed by the flame, and that her powerful soul was the only catalyst truly responsible for creating the bed of chaos. And some simply believe she escaped, disappeared into the world. The truth of the matter, though, is that we'll never know. But the dark was still looming over Gwyn and the gods, and their options were dwindling. More concerned about himself and his own kind over the humans and the pygmy lords, Gwyn conceived a plan to manipulate them further to his own gain. To the pygmy lords, he granted great crowns and bestowed to them a grand city at the world's end, the Ringed City. He also relinquished his youngest daughter to them, though he promised to return to her when the time was right. The Ringed City was used as a containment of sorts, to banish the dark soul to the end of the world and keep it cut off. Perhaps Gwyn thought that this would be enough to save them, and in some way, I suppose it did. The Way of White was a church or a cult. Perspective is important, dedicated to Gwyn's Age of Fire and preserving it in any way necessary. It became the most widely known and most commonly practiced religion in the world, humanity included. So in Gwyn's deception, even humanity fell in line with his lies. Perhaps it was that they never sought their own power, or perhaps they didn't know. As we'll learn in time, however, some of humanity certainly knew of their obtainable power and warred for it. But the pygmy lords sat at the world's end, inside of their walls, content to keep the dark soul in check on Gwyn's behest. The dark soul, though, resides in all of humanity. Whether it was spread to them by the furtive pygmy upon finding this soul, or that it's just the true nature of mankind. Much like chaos, the dark could surely not be contained forever. With Izalith in ruin and the demonic threat spreading, Gwyn stood on the precipice of yet another war. He took with him an army of his silver knights and descended into Izalith to snuff out the demon threat. We can't know for sure how long this war lasted, or how long the demons existed before Gwyn took the war to them. But there are traces of demonic civilizations and a hierarchy among them, as they had a king and a prince. One way or another, Gwyn was also no match for chaos. His band of silver knights were charred to black, and failing to defeat the demons, he retreated. Gwyn was out of time. The age of dark had dawned, and his fire had burned out. Gwyn knew now the drastic lengths he would have to go. But he first had the foresight to split pieces of his powerful soul among those he trusted, as well as a piece of it went to the four kings of New Londo. But we'll come back to that later. Gwyn commanded his people to shepherd humanity, and with no other choice, he took off with his remaining knights to the kiln of the first flame. It was here that Gwyn sacrificed himself to the flame to preserve his age of fire. Using his body as the kindling, he ignited himself to reignite the first flame and bring back the age of fire. In doing so, he placed the same seal of fire he had previously placed upon the abyss-forged weapons and armor of humanity upon their dark soul itself, afflicting the undead curse upon humanity. Humans were branded with the dark sign, an accursed symbol that marked them as undead, cursed to never die, reborn after death time and time again. With each death, they lost more and more of their humanity, until none remained, and they would go hollow, losing their minds, losing themselves, losing every bit of humanity except for life itself. The Age of Fire is restored, but Gwyn is nothing but a hollowed husk of the powerful god he once was, the first Lord of Cinder. He stays at the kiln, sitting in defense of the first flame, an eternal duty. The Way of White recognizes the threat that the undead pose, and upon Gwyn's command to shepherd humanity, they lead great undead hunts and corral them into asylums. In these asylums, the undying men and women would await the end of the world. Of course, not all undead would end up in asylums. Here, we'll turn our eyes to two primordial serpents, starting with the one called Koth. Not much is known about these serpents, but as their name suggests, they've been around for quite a while. And as we'll learn, we have to take everything they say with a grain of salt. Koth makes his way to the city of Ulasil, known for its ancient and golden sorceries. Far beneath Ulasil was the tomb of the primeval man, Manus. Koth was the serpent advocate for the dark. He didn't believe in Gwyn's Age of Fire, and was in search for the one chosen to be the Dark Lord, who would usher in a true age of dark. Koth convinced the people of Ulasil to awaken the primeval man, but in doing so, they drove Manus to madness, until his humanity snapped and went wild as he endlessly sought his precious pendant, likely the last tie he had to who he truly was or whom he loved. As for what the pendant contained, we may never know. But it is said of humanity that the will feels envy or perhaps love, and despite the inevitably trite and tragic ending, the will sees no alternative and is driven madly towards its target. And so Manus became the beastly father of the Abyss. The Abyss began spawning off of Manus himself, and quickly threatened to swallow all of Ulasil, and eventually the world. As the fall of Ulasil begins, and its citizens are tainted by the Abyss and transformed into disfigured creatures, Manus kidnaps Dusk, the princess of Ulasil, and drags her into the Abyss. Koth then makes his way to New Londo, where the four kings who were granted a piece of Gwyn's powerful soul ruled. Koth played a role in these four kings' fall to the dark when he dangled the power of life drain before them. He incited the covenant known as the Dark Wraiths, which consisted of knights of the four kings. He granted them the art of life drain, which allowed them to sap the humanity from other humans to preserve their own. The four kings and their Dark Wraiths were intended to play their role in following the Dark Lord and ushering in an age of dark, the age of man. The Dark Wraiths could invade the worlds of other humans to pillage their humanity, and were often referred to as the enemy of man. Though, as with most things in Dark Souls, that thought is completely subjective. So we see the Abyss spring up in New Londo as well, as its kings and their people willingly embrace the dark. This is where we meet Knight Artorias, one of the four knights of Gwyn. Knight Artorias made it his mission to battle back the Abyss at every turn, and was known for annihilating Dark Wraiths throughout his quest. However, the Abyss in New Londo was different than in Ulasil. While the Abyss itself was the same, in Ulasil it was spawning from Manus, but in New Londo it was just simply there. There wasn't any conventional way to prevent the spread of the Abyss in New Londo from tainting its way to the rest of the world. So, 3 sealers sealed the city and flooded it with water. This was their only perceived way to contain the Abyss here, though it was an agonizing decision. Countless lives lost, the robust culture of a city erased. The victims of this flood would go on to roam the city's ruins as ghosts. Knight Artorias then set off to Ulasil with his wolf companion Sif. Artorias, having made a covenant with the beasts of the Abyss, wore a ring that symbolized this and allowed Artorias to freely traverse the endless dark. So he and Sif descended into the Abyss to slay Manus and halt the spread of it. But such a hero as Artorias has nary a murmur of dark, and would thus become corrupted by it. Before losing his mind to the Abyss, he used his great shield to place an aura around his companion Sif to keep the wolf safe. Thus, the hero Artorias falls to the dark, and is nothing more than the creatures he once hunted. But time is indeed a convoluted and confusing thing in Dark Souls, and things get a little interesting here. In the future, the world sings the songs of praise for Artorias, the Abyss Walker, the hero who defeated Manus and put an end to the Abyss's threat. Only that isn't what happened at all. But we'll have to circle back to this at a later point. Back at Anor Londo, the great city of the gods, Guinevere, the eldest daughter of Gwyn, and the other gods flee from the city. Lord Gwyn is gone, the Abyss is sprouting up all over Lordran, and eventually the flame will fade again. So they fled. To where, we can't be sure. But one god did stay behind. Gwendolyn, Gwen's youngest son and the god of the dark moon. Gwendolyn was a master of illusions, and though the sun had set on Anor Londo, and it was in a bleak and depressing state, he used his illusions to restore the once great city. He brought back the shining sun, the sentinels to guard, and even placed an illusion of his sister Guinevere within the city. All seemed well in Anor Londo again, and so the Age of Fire continued. For how long this time, we still can't be sure. We fast forward to the flame fading once again, as we knew it would, and the world back on that same precipice facing an age of dark. The story leads us to the Northern Undead Asylum. Here, locked within a cell, we find a lonely and all but hollowed human marked with the dark sign, the Chosen Undead. Through a hole in the roof of their cell, an unnamed knight of Astora drops the Chosen Undead the key to their cell. Escaping this dreary cell, they wander through the asylum in search of escape, until they run into the same knight that dropped them the key. This knight of Astora reveals the ancient legend of the Chosen Undead. Thou who art undead art chosen, and that one day an undead would be chosen to make pilgrimage to the land of the lords, Lordran. And when thou ringeth the bell of awakening, the fate of the undead thou shalt know. Luckily, this gravely wounded knight of Astora freed from their cell the very undead this prophecy speaks of. The Chosen Undead continues to search for an exit, only to find it guarded by the asylum demon. After defeating this demon, they receive a key to the large door leading out of the asylum, only to find that there isn't anywhere to go. The asylum itself is isolated in the middle of nowhere. Before being able to scan their surroundings, a giant crow swoops in and ushers the Chosen Undead to Firelink Shrine, a focal point in their journey. It is at Firelink Shrine that the Chosen Undead meets a firekeeper, a woman slated with the duty of tending to bonfires across Lordran. Each firekeeper is a corporeal manifestation of her bonfire, and is a draw for the humanity offered to her, and thus her soul is gnawed at by infinite humanity. The bonfire offers an undead a place of repose. There they can burn pieces of humanity to regain their own. In Firelink Shrine, the Chosen Undead meets a rather crestfallen warrior, who tells them that there are actually two bells of awakening. One up above Firelink in an abandoned cathedral, and another deep down below in the ruins of Blighttown. The Chosen Undead sets out to ring these bells of awakening, one guarded by the cathedral gargoyles, and the other guarded by Quelaag, one of the Witch of Izalith's demon-deformed daughters. Upon ringing the second bell, the gates to Sin's fortress, the perilous house of traps and puzzles, and the only way through to the city of Anor Londo, opens. Before traversing Sin's fortress, the Chosen Undead returns to Firelink Shrine, where he meets a primordial serpent by the name of Frampt. This serpent, unlike his counterpart Koth, sided with Lord Gwyn and his Age of Fire, and wishes to see it extended. Frampt tells the chosen undead that he was a close friend of Lord Gwyn, and that it is their fate to succeed him, to link the flame, cast away the dark, and undo the curse of the undead. He says that the chosen undead must first go to Anor Londo to retrieve the Lord Vessel. The chosen undead heads in the direction of Anor Londo by first traversing through the House of Traps, Sin's fortress. In this fortress, they find an imprisoned scholar by the name of Big Hat Logan. The chosen undead helps to free Logan before continuing on. Atop Sin's fortress, we see that the way to Anor Londo has been caved in by rock and debris, and is being guarded by a giant iron golem. But after defeating this golem, the chosen undead is ushered over the walls and into Anor Londo by bat-winged demons. How or why these demons were in the service of the gods, we may never know. Here, in the city of the gods, the chosen undead finds their search for the Lord Vessel barred by two knights. Ornstein, one of the 4 knights of Gwyn, and Smo. They defeat their adversaries and press onward. Within the next chamber, the chosen undead comes face to face with Gwyn's eldest daughter, Guinevere, though they know not that she is just an illusion crafted by Gwendolyn, Gwyn's youngest son and god of the Dark Moon, who stayed behind in the abandoned city of the gods, casting his illusions to set the chosen undead on their path. The illusion of Guinevere gives the chosen undead a speech not unlike Frampt's. Succeed my father and link the flame. She then bestows the Lord Vessel upon them, which the chosen undead returns to Frampt. Frampt transports the chosen undead to the Firelink altar and tells them to place the Lord Vessel upon it. The altar is placed before a large door, one that leads to the kiln of the first flame, and to the Lord of Cinder Gwyn himself. In order to open this door, the chosen undead will need to satiate the Lord Vessel with powerful souls. Frampt tells them to retrieve the Lord Soul of both the Witch of Izalith and of Gravelord Nito. He also says to retrieve the bequeathed shards of Lord Gwyn's soul from Seath the Scaleless and the 4 kings of New Londo. On the way to the Duke's archives in Anor Londo to retrieve the shard of Gwyn's soul from Seath, the chosen undead make their way through the Darkroot Garden. It is here that the timeline may take a convoluted turn. In the garden, the chosen undead frees a woman who found herself trapped within a crystalline golem. She tells them that she is Princess Dusk of Ulasil, and not of this land or of this time, but thanks them for helping her. When the chosen undead arrives in the Duke's archives, they see the same crystalline golems, and from one falls a half-broken pendant attached to a vine that appears to originate from Ulasil. The chosen undead returns to the garden to see what Princess Dusk makes of this. However, instead of Dusk, they find what appears to be a fractured tear through time. A large hand emerges from within and drags the chosen undead through. They find themselves in Ulasil now, though not of the current time, likely from when and where Dusk was claiming she was from before. Here, the chosen undead meets a talking mushroom named Elizabeth, who tells them that Dusk has been dragged into the abyss that is currently swallowing Ulasil by Manus, which were the events talked about earlier. Either way, the chosen undead agrees to help Dusk, but they first come face to face with Knight Artorias. Though this is the Artorias that fell corrupted to the dark of the abyss, and can't tell friend from foe as he attacks the chosen undead. The chosen undead puts Artorias out of his misery and presses on towards the abyss. Within the edge of the abyss, the chosen undead finds Artorias' wolf companion Sif, still within the magical aura she was placed in by the Great Shield. The chosen undead eliminates the threats that surrounded Sif, allowing the wolf to safely make their escape. Further into the abyss, the chosen undead finally finds Manus, the primeval man. A fight erupts, and the chosen undead finds a way to slay the father of the abyss, which halts it from further spreading through Ulasil and the world. So the chosen undead played the role of Artorias from the legends of the Abyss Walker. Only it was never Artorias that defeated Manus and halted the spread of the abyss. But the chosen undead will never receive that recognition. Either way, they rescue Dusk from the abyss and return to their own time. Back in the Duke's archives, chosen undead runs into Big Hat Logan again, who has been here studying Seath's crystal sorceries. He tells the chosen undead how to kill Seath, that his immortality is linked to the primordial crystal. During their showdown with Seath, chosen undead first shatters that crystal before they can claim Seath's life, as well as the shard of Gwyn's soul. They then tread down into the ruins of Izalith to dismantle the Bed of Chaos and claim the remains of the Witch of Izalith's soul. After that, it's a trip into the Tomb of Giants to defeat Gravelord Nito and take his soul as well. Finally, all that remains is the last piece of Lord Gwyn's soul held by the 4 kings of New Londo. But in order to face them, the chosen undead will need to find a way to traverse the abyss. The solution is Artorias' ring, which is unfortunately guarded by a now fully grown giant grey wolf Sif, who, although still remembers the chosen undead from saving them once upon a time, will perpetually guard her master's grave, even if she doesn't want to. Thus, the chosen undead puts a tragic end to the wolf and receives the ring. With Artorias' ring, the chosen undead is able to enter the abyss and claim the piece of Gwyn's soul from the 4 kings. They then return to the Firelink altar to place the souls within the Lord Vessel and open the way to the kiln. The chosen undead passes through the opened gates towards the first flame in belief that they are about to save the world. There, at the kiln, Gwyn sits before the first flame, still but a hollowed husk of the lord he once was, but powerful nonetheless. Here, the two do battle. For what Gwyn is fighting for, he may not even remember, but the chosen undead fights to extend the fire and to lift the curse of their people. At the end of their bloody fight, the chosen undead stands alone at the kiln of the first flame. stands where it all started and where it all could end. The first flame, such a fragile conundrum of peace and despair. The chosen undead extends themselves to the flame, lets it consume them, to use their body and soul as kindling, to breathe life back into the flame, and thus extending the age of fire yet again. Drangleic is a land of cycles, a realm in which the very nature of things is repeated indefinitely. Countless kingdoms have been erected on this earth, yet all were destined to perish, for that is the way of this place. With the defeat of Manus, father of the abyss, a series of events were set into motion that would continue to alter this land for many millennia. Upon his demise, the darkness within Manus fragmented and scattered. These fragments of the primordial man would manifest into beings of manipulation, creatures of the dark. These children of Manus would go on to shape the essence of the kingdoms they helped to create, as well as destroy. The shards of Manus attached themselves to lords, powerful men that would go to conquer this land. They formed great townships that would prosper for but a moment before being swallowed by the cycle once again. Sholva, the Broom Tower, Aleum Lois, these are the kingdoms that predate the mightier realms of this land, yet all fallen to the wrath of the cycle. Sholva, the Sanctum City, home of the slumbering dragon, was invaded by the Drakeblood Knights. They disturbed sin and unleashed a miasma upon the kingdom. Broom Tower was abandoned by its lord, the Iron King, as he no longer had need of it. Falling into ruin, the tower came under the control of Nadalia, Bride of Ash. Aleum Lois, once a prosperous kingdom, was consumed by a terrible winter after the Ivory King failed to return from a conquest into the chaos of old. Alsana, the Silent Oracle, created the unyielding frost to safeguard against the churning chaos that had claimed her dear king. There are many of these lost kingdoms, few of which sport a longevity to be remembered. Olafis is one such example of this tragedy. While not much is known of this place, its prevalence lives on in different ways. Look no further than the petrified mages and pyromancers that scatter the landscape. The deep chronology of these fallen kingdoms struggles to manifest in the history of this land. One figure, however, managed to rise above the obscurity of time, and through his accomplishments, cemented his reign in history, the Iron King. Once a feeble lord, the Iron King was visited by an elite swordsman, only known as Sir Alon. With the assistance of Alon, the would-be king led a conquest into the land of Ven, expending most of his wealth in the process. Triumphant yet drained, the king uncovered the scorching iron scepter, an iron-producing miracle. The king proceeded to create a great metal fortress within the old region of Alka. This keep whose walls were clad with only the strongest iron, was appropriately deemed the Iron Keep. His tower now obsolete, the king abdicated the region in favor of his new home. Prosperity would not follow, as the undead curse would soon descend upon the land. The Iron King corralled the undead into the huntsman's copse in an attempt to stave off the curse's influence, subjecting them to the most gruesome and inhumane conditions. With his realm on the decline, the Iron King turned to experimentation. He sought power. He wanted to recreate the golems of legend. It was probably then that his longtime friend and advisor, Sir Alon, abandoned the king, fearing he had gone too far. Unperturbed, the Iron King continued his research. With the assistance of Egil, the king created the Smelter Demon, an obscenely powerful automaton. The Smelter Demon overpowered its masters and began terrorizing the halls of the Iron Keep. Now in ruin, the heavy fortress slowly sinks into the earth. The story of Drangleic is very much the story of its king, as if the two were linked together by fate. Not much is known about where he came from, or what he found when he arrived in this land that had seen countless kingdoms rise and fall. But when Vendrick came to Drangleic, he quickly rose to power. With his faithful knights, Velstadt and Bramy, and his older brother Aldia, he became the undisputed ruler of Drangleic. And under the leadership of Vendrick and his brother, Drangleic flourished. As it was with the kingdoms before it, Drangleic was visited by a fragment of Manus named Nashandra. Just like her sisters, Nashandra managed to win the king's favor and ear. With Nashandra at court, things changed. Aldia, who had been given lordship by Vendrick, became obsessed with his research and barely ever left his keep. Meanwhile, Nashandra urged Vendrick to travel across the sea and lay waste to the giants inhabiting it, and eventually did. Vendrick brought war to the giants across the sea, and returned with an unnamed prize. In his own words, "I subdued the giants and claimed their strength, so that I might step closer to fire." With the strength of the giants, golems were created and used to construct Drangleic Castle, where Vendrick and Nashandra resided, protected by Velstadt. Their victory was short-lived, however, when the surviving giants mounted a counterattack on Drangleic. Motivated by revenge or to reclaim what Vendrick stole, they rampaged through the lands, leaving chaos and ruins in their wake. In a war that lasted for generations, the giants laid siege to Drangleic until an unnamed combatant killed the giant lord, and the survivors were forced to retreat. Drangleic won the war against the giants, but paid dearly for it. While Drangleic was still recovering, Vendrick and his now queen Nashandra heard reports of a curse of undeath spreading throughout the kingdom. Vendrick tasked the Flexile Sentry to bring the afflicted to the lost Bastille had hired assassins from the Order of Shadow Knights to slay Hollows, while Aldea worked on a cure. Their efforts were in vain, and the curse ran rampant through Drangleic. The brothers eventually grew apart in the fight against the curse, and Aldea was banished to his mansion that would later be known as Aldea's Keep. The undead curse continued until even Vendrick was afflicted. Through his research and being afflicted by the curse himself, he saw the world more clearly and realized Nishandra's true nature. Taking his loyal knight Velstad, Vendrick made his last preparations and left Drangleic Castle for the undead crypt, where he would eventually go hollow. Now the king withers underground, and his kingdom with him. Much like the kingdoms before it, Drangleic fell victim to the things that lurk below: the chaos, the darkness, and the great souls of old. A time after the war in Drangleic, an undead from a faraway land south of the kingdom is suffering from the effects of the undead curse. We see them losing their memory, and in an attempt to halt the progress of that degradation, they find their way to the lodgings of an old woman we later find out is an old firekeeper. Upon seeing the degradation of the bearer of the curse, she spins them a tale of a land far to the north, an old kingdom called Drangleic. The old firekeeper leads them to believe that the souls found in this land may be enough to mend their ailing mind. The bearer of the curse stumbles their way north, near total hollowing, before reaching the entrance to that kingdom. At the entrance, there appears to be nothing left but ruins. However, in the center of a ruined building is a tree covered in flame butterflies. This swarm begins to cover the area, lighting all the torches and seemingly opening the way to the lost kingdom, for in the reflection of the water, we see that the reflection shows the buildings and the kingdoms that used to be. In the cyclone, a black hole tears itself in the water, and the bearer of the curse throws themselves in. Upon awakening, they find themselves in a place called Things Betwixt. Now, Things Betwixt essentially means things between. From the previous events and the rather unusual denizens of this place, we are meant to conclude that this is a place between the world of Drangleic and the place we came from. This is confirmed by housekeeper Milibeth, who in a dialogue says, "This is Limbo, a link between Drangleic and the outer world. Fair traveler, I know that you must have a story. Why else would you visit such a place? This lost, decayed kingdom." The denizens that we find in this house are being looked after by Milibeth and are wearing the same clothes as the old deer that directed us here. And Milibeth says that the old women were once firekeepers, but now the fire shows signs of fading. And she also confirms that there was once a fourth, which is the old woman who directed us here. These firekeepers mock and laugh at the bearer of the curse for their hollowing state, noting that they are close to completely fading away. yet they help them to restore their memory by passing over a human effigy. These effigies are meant to reflect the human appearance of the beholder, and using these effigies, the bearer of the curse can remember their name and who they were before. With their memory temporarily restored, they finally leave things betwixt and end up in Majula, an undead refuge. Here we find the crestfallen Salden, who tells us of Majula, that it is a kind of settlement, a place where life is almost normal. And in Drangleic these days, there are very few places like that. This is where the flotsam and jetsam of Drangleic end up. The bearer of the curse will meet several characters here, all who are here for their reasons and motivations. It is here that the bearer of the curse meets the Emerald Herald, who will act as their guide, for she directs them towards the way we can overcome the curse, and it is she who names them the bearer of the curse, the moniker that describes their burden. Go on and see the king, he who made Drangleic what it once was, he who peered at the essence of the soul, King Vendrick, bearer of the curse. Seek misery, for misery will lead you to greater, stronger souls. Seek those whose names are unutterable, the four endowed with immense souls. Their souls will serve as beacons. Once you have found them, return here to me, so that hope will not fade away. The herald tells the bearer of the curse that to overcome the curse, they must seek powerful souls and then meet the king of Drangleic, Vendrick. Specifically, she tells them that they are to seek four beings with unutterable names and powerful souls. The herald then directs them to that tiny thing inside the ruins, who is an ancient being that can impart wisdom. This is the cat, known to be Sweet Shalcor, whose true nature eludes us. However, she does impart some guidance on the four great beings that they are to track down and claim power from. She says, "Are you going to see the old ones? Those four who have grown so incredibly ancient?" During the search for these great ones, the bearer of the curse sees many things, including signs of Drangleic's past war with the giants in the forest of the fallen giants. In the forest, we find fallen giants who are taking roots and becoming trees, as well as the remains of the crumbling fortress manned by hollowed Drangleic soldiers. This was a battlement specifically built on the coast to defend against the giants who came from across the sea. Imprisoned in a chamber below the fortifications is the last giant. The bearer of the curse encounters this being, who, seemingly enraged upon seeing the undead, flies into a rage and attacks. It is as if the being recognizes the bearer of the curse, a conundrum that will be answered later in their journey. Having walked through the shattered remains of a battlefield, the bearer of the curse explores the far corners of the land of Drangleic in search of the four great souls. In doing so, they will pass through the remains of other fallen kingdoms, like Hyde, Harvest Valley, and the kingdom of the Iron King. The hunt takes them to the Lost Bastille, the prison that was once used by Vendrick to ship undead from No Man's Wharf to the Handle outbreak. In a special tower called Sinner's Rise, in the lowest cells, there is a being called the Lost Sinner. The Lost Sinner is one of the 4 great souls that the Emerald Herald told us of, and Shalcor gives us further explanation as to why this sinner is called so. They created a towering bastille to contain them, but in the end it did no good. The Lost Sinner lives deep within the bastille, the fool trying to light the first flame. There is one being we know who tried to recreate the first flame, the Witch of Izalith. Now, it does not explicitly mention her by name. The Lost Sinner does drop the old witch soul and seems to be infected by a chaos bug. The implication is that the being before us owns an ancient soul of a witch that has been recycled into a new being. An old witch who once tried to recreate the first flame. The continuing search for great souls takes the bearer of the curse to the very depths of the land that we stand on, down into the gutter that is in the center of Majula Township. So they follow the waste of the world down into the depths of a shanty town, for those forgotten by the world, and beyond into the Black Gulch, where the bearer of the curse finds the Rotten, another bearer of a mighty and ancient soul. The Rotten has created a sanctuary for the lost things found down the gutter. His embrace may not be one to be desired, given his body is made up of those who are lost and have been embraced by him. This being drops a soul called Old Dead One Soul. Again, a reminder that this holding an ancient soul, one that has most likely seen many cycles and reincarnations, there was once an ancient being who had reign over the dead, but the connections are there to be made. The next ancient soul awaits the bearer of the curse in the fallen kingdom of the Old Iron King. The kingdom we have already explored the history of. The bearer of the curse comes to the sunken fortress and faces down the Old Iron King, who has transformed into a hideous demon-like being, formed of pure magma. His soul tells us that he fell, and his soul was possessed by the things that lurk below. The final of the 4 great souls needed to meet the king is found in Brightstone, Seldora, a mining colony that was once run by Duke Seldora, who was known for his fascination with spiders and built a town and personal fortune by mining Brightstone. One day, that town was overrun by spiders, but Lord Seldora only stood by and watched, eerily contented. That is indeed the state we find the town in, covered in spiders, and an army camp posted at the entrance to contain the fallen town. The cause of this outbreak? In the depths of the mind, hanging from the corpse of a dead everlasting dragon, is the Duke's dear Freya, a monstrous 2-headed spider who seems to be the broodmother for the rest of the spiders. Upon their defeat, the bearer of the curse now has all 4 ancient souls, and when handing them to the Emerald Herald, tells them to proceed to the castle, and that now we are in possession of the powerful souls. The Shrine of Winter gives them passage to to the castle. In Drangleic Castle, we see evidence of golems that are powered by souls. The bearer of the curse then climbs the castle and meets Nashandra, who is wearing a beautiful queenly guise. She tells the undead that the king has long since fled and implores them to follow the king. Why does she do this? Because she wants access to the throne of Want, which Vendrick managed to seal before he left, keeping her hands from what she covets. To access this, she will need the king's ring, and who better to retrieve it than the bearer of 4 powerful souls? For the king did not leave himself unprotected. The menacing-looking glass knight protects the king's passage, and the bearer of the curse must slay the beast before being able to follow Vendrick. The undead enters a region called the Shrine of Amana. In this shrine area, the bearer of the curse discovers a mixture of different cultures and remnants. For example, we find there are several Milifinito here, whose purpose seems to be to sing to bring comfort to the dead in the dark. Yet further into the shrine, there is far more, such as the hideous demon of song. The shrine not only confines the dead, but also this hideous beast, which unfortunately also forms another obstacle to the king. And so the bearer of the curse slays the beast and makes their way into the undead crypt, where they finally find the king and his men. Standing between them and the king, however, is the mighty Velstad, the royal Aegis, great defender of the king in the crypt. He and Raimi were once the right and left arms of the king, but when Raimi turned traitor, Velstad was the only loyal man he had left. Velstad and his soul have become bathed in the dark of the crypt. And so, during the bearer of the curse's battle with him, he unleashes the power of the dark upon them. When Velstad falls, they have safe passage to the king. But alas, the king is no more. He is simply a hollow who has dropped his equipment and clothing as he endlessly circles the chamber. However, the king's ring can still be rescued, the key to the king's door that seals the throne of Want and Aldia's manor. The door in the basement of the castle opens, and the bearer of the curse enters the chamber of the throne of Want, but cannot reach it. They will need more understanding. And so the bearer of the curse uses the king's ring to access Aldia's manor. Within the manor, the bearer of the curse witnesses the remnants of Aldia's research into breaking the cycles and of dragons. Passing through the manor, they find themselves in the Dragon Eyrie, where Aldia's experiments seem to roam free, with members of the Path of the Dragon even coming here to worship the dragonkin that fly around. Making their way to the top of the Dragon's Keep, the bearer of the curse is interrupted by a being known as the Scholar of the First Sin. This is Aldia, and has interrupted them twice already, including once in the undead crypt. Aldia became obsessed with finding a way to break the cycle, on which he blames the first sin, the first relinking of the fire that doomed the world to endless cycles. To this end, he experimented with giants in an attempt to create ancient dragons. This makes sense given that ancient dragons existed outside of this cycle in endless, never-ending life. So, Aldea poses a series of questions about this. He uses a lot of riddles and language, but in essence, he asks, what is the point in perpetuating the cycle? What is the point in relinking the fire or in letting it die when both result in continuing that very cycle? At the top of the Eyrie, the bearer of the curse discovers the fruits of Aldea's experimentation, an ancient dragon. This is a recreated dragon made from a giant. And despite it being an engineered dragon, it still has powerful uses for the bearer of the curse to use upon its defeat, namely the Ashen Mist Heart, which is an ability that allows them to peer through the mist of time by traveling into the past through the memories of others. With the power of this ancient dragon, the bearer of the curse returned to the forest of fallen giants, where we peer into the memories of the giants who have fallen here. Through this, they witness the siege of Drangleic by the giants, and the collapse of the fort that we first see when entering the forest of the fallen giants. Eventually, after trawling through the memories of the giants, they travel back in time to a battle where the Lord of the Giants himself is waging war on the battlements. Looking at the shape and size of the Giant Lord, he looks to be the same physicality as the last giant. The last giant is the Lord who was defeated that day, and the bearer of the curse is the unknown warrior who felled him after traveling back in time. After the defeat of this giant lord, the bearer of the curse earns the giant kinship, which allows them to be kin to the golems that they find in the Throne of Want. They proceed to the throne and face down its protectors, the Watcher and the Defender. With the throne's defenses finally down, Nashandra now chooses to reveal her true self. She is here for the throne herself, and she has used the bearer of the curse to clear the way. Nashandra's soul tells us that she was once the Shard of Manus who was defeated in the abyss, the Shard of Want, the shard that wants and covets power. She covets the throne. The bearer of the curse has become too powerful now, however, and Nashandra is no match for them, as she's cast back into the dark. Aldea appears to test the bearer of the curse one last time. His reasons are his own, but even after he falls, his question rings in our ears. I lost everything, but remained here, patiently. The throne will certainly receive you, but the question remains. What do you want, truly? Light? Dark? Or something else entirely? So, with the throne within the reach of the bearer of the curse, thanks to the giant's kinship, which will command the golems to form a bridge, they have two choices. They become king and ponder whether to link the fire or not, or they listen to Aldea, who can exist within the flame as a result of him studying the nature of the first sin, i.e., the linking of the fire, and refuse to be a part of the cycle and choose to walk away. Yes, indeed, as the legend of the flame continues to seduce hero after hero, the world is reborn countless times. But each time, as the flame illuminates the world anew, more scars are revealed from the withdrawing shadows. With each new cycle, the world grows a little more twisted and a little more pale. Towards the end of each era, the flame draws its strength from the accursed, like a cancer, sustaining itself on the humanity of those it pretends to serve. But the story is always the same. Some well-meaning hero comes along and sacrifices themselves to relight the flame and puts the undead curse on hold. That hero is then hailed as a Lord of Cinder, if he is strong enough to survive the process intact. Jumping ahead to the present, the fire begins to fade, yet again, but this time a bell tolls. It's a signal for 5 of the Lords of Cinder to rise once more to give themselves to the flame. But instead of heeding its call, the lords turn their back on it. Apparently, self-immolation isn't something they were keen on doing twice. Except for one, Ludlith of Corland, diminutive in stature perhaps, but powerful in purpose. When it's clear that the Lords of Cinder aren't coming back, the bell tolls once again to awaken the unkindled ash. A person who previously tried to light the flame, but were ultimately unsuccessful. The unkindled one is tasked with the inevitable burden of bringing back the 4 remaining Lords of Cinder, so that they can once again burn in the name of the first flame. No easy task, as all the lords are powerful beings with their own reasons as to why they turned their back on the flame. Aldrich, the Saint of the Deep, was a cleric who began eating people. Ate so many that his body got bloated and turned into sludge. This also gave Aldrich a tremendous amount of strength and power. So, they threw him on the flame as a sacrifice to extend the Age of Fire. Upon his revival, rather than making his way back to Firelink Shrine, he instead decided to make his way to Anor Londo, where he is currently suckling on the bones of gods, specifically upon Gwyndolin, the god of the Dark Moon. Then we have Yorm the Giant, known as the reclusive lord of the profaned capital. A capable warrior, a giant in every sense of the word. Yorm had the displeasure of dealing with not only one flame-related issue, but 2. The linking of the first flame and the curbing of what was known as the profaned flame. As Yorm linked the fire, something went horribly wrong, and his home was engulfed by fire, melting the flesh off the bones of the people he had once sworn to protect. The Abyss Watchers, a legion of warriors treading the path of an ancient hero and his wolf companion. Bound by blood and unshakable in their purpose, this undead legion would do anything to curb the spread of the abyss. Even goes so far as to bury a kingdom at the first sign of infestation. And lastly, Prince Lothric. Lothric is a special case. He's technically not a Lord of Cinder, but his family had this obsession of creating a worthy heir to the flame, even to the point where they would do unspeakable things to ensure that Lothric would live up to that lofty goal. Prince Lothric, however, influenced by the first of the scholars, came to the realization that he didn't want to burn alive just because his family said so. So he and his brother Lorien retreated to their stronghold just to watch as the fire faded and the world was plunged into darkness. Clearly, the journey of the Ashen One would be quite the arduous one. After a quick stroll through the graveyard and a battle against a warrior known as the Ashen Judge, the Unkindled arrives at Firelink Shrine. There, they meet the Firekeeper, who tells the Ashen One that if the lords will not return to their thrones willingly, then return them as ash. In order to find these lords and return them to their thrones, the Unkindled One seeks them out at the homes that they have returned to. They first go to the Cathedral of the Deep to find Aldrich, only to find that he isn't here either. The Unkindled One does, however, meet a hooded man named Gale that appears to be praying to the goddess of sin, Velka, within the cathedral. Gale asks the Unkindled One if they can help him help his lady, who is inside the painted world of Ariandel, waiting to see flame, so that she may paint a new painting. When the Unkindled One agrees, they are drawn into the painted world by the remaining scrap of it that Gale possesses. In this painted world of Ariandel, we can see that the world has begun to rot. This is all in part to a woman named Sister Frida, who was the eldest sister who helped found the Sable Church of Londor, a church dedicated to the teachings of Koth and finding the true Dark Lord, the Lord of Hollows, to usher in the Age of Man. Sister Frida abandoned the Sable Church and retreated to the Painted World, where she manipulated Father Ariandel. The denizens of the Painted World state that the one thing they do right here is when the rot comes, they allow the fire to burn it and the world away to await a new one. The opposite of what they do on the outside world, constantly rekindling the first flame to preserve the age of fire and stave off the natural order of things. But Sister Frida has convinced Father Ariandel otherwise, and he now sits below the painting's chapel, flailing himself so that his blood may appease the flame that would otherwise burn the rot in the world away. The Unkindled One finds the lady of whom Gale spoke, the young painter locked away on Frida's orders. She tells them that in order to paint a new painting, she must first see flame. The Unkindled One knows that this can't happen so long as Sister Frida and Father Ariandel have seized power, and so they confront them. After battling with a stubborn Frida, who quite frankly kept refusing to die, the Unkindled One finally succeeds and takes her and Father Ariandel out of the picture. The flame, no longer appeased by Father Ariandel's blood, starts to slowly consume the painting and burn the rot away. The Unkindled One returns to the painter, and she thanks them. She says that now that she's seen flame, she's just waiting for her Uncle Gale to bring her the proper pigment for her painting, the dark soul of man. After helping the painter and the painting, the unkindled one returns to their world and to their duty, only to find that Gale is missing. Either way, the unkindled one travels to the ruins of the old city of the gods, Anne Orlando, to find Aldrich there in the process of devouring Gwendolyn, the god of the dark moon. Aldrich refuses to return for his duty, and so the unkindled one slays him and brings back his ashes instead. In the profaned capital, Yorm the Giant refuses to do so as well. And same goes for the Abyss Watchers in Farron's Keep. So the unkindled one is left with the same choice. Bring them back to do their duty, or bring back their ashes. And ashes they will all become. Finally, in Lothric Castle, the unkindled one confronts Prince Lothric about his duty. But the young prince cares not for the fire and its practices. Couldn't care less if it all went away. Though he and his brother Lorien are a powerful force to be reckoned with, the unkindled one proves to be their match. They collect Lothric's ashes as well. While traversing the halls of Lothric, heading back to Firelink Shrine with their duty completed, the unkindled one hears strange cries reverberating off the walls of the castle and decides to investigate. They at last find the source of the haunting cries that echoed through the former gardens. At the end of a great hall, a frail, twisted creature, vaguely resembling Seath the Pale Drake of old, cradles nothing in its claws. This creature is Osiros, the king of Lothric, who, in his quest to create the perfect air to kindle the flame, had become obsessed with moonlight and dragonkind alike. His body was warped by the magic of the Grand Archive's heretics, and with this new draconic form, he fathered a half-breed child with Lothric's queen and named him Ocelot. Shortly after she had given birth to the child, though, she disappeared. Now, at the end of this age of fire, Osiros is huddled in what remains of his castle. He had lost his eyesight, his human body, his queen, and by the look of his empty hands, quite possibly the air that he demented himself to create. In his delusions, he lashes out at the unkindled one, all the while making desperate pleas for his child to come out of hiding, assuring them that there is nothing to fear. As the fight rages on, something seems to break within him. He screams Ocelot's name, holds the hand that seemed to cradle the unseen child aloft, and then slams it to the floor. It is unclear if this was the end of the half-breed heir, as the baby's cries are still heard echoing throughout the crumbling hall until Osiros himself falls silent. The Ashen One succeeds where countless assassins had failed before. Osiris had lost so much before their encounter, but now he had lost what remained of his unraveling mind, and ultimately his life. What lies beyond the fallen king's final resting place is a corridor of dead serpent men, and one Drakeblood night, giving way to a darkened, eerily familiar path. This is the path to the cemetery of ash from the beginning of the Unkindled One's journey, but it is now known as the Untended Graves. From the outset, it is unclear if this realm is a view into the past, a vision of the future, or an intersection of similar realms as time and space become progressively more convoluted in the end days of an age of fire. It is a realm exactly like where the Unkindled One awoke some time ago, except that it is shrouded in perpetual darkness and filled with Corvians. A familiar grave, the one the Unkindled One itself rose from, is open and empty. Hidden within this darkened realm is the Ashen Estus Ring, treasure enshrined to this place by Lothric's now departed queen, to serve an unkindled who finds it well at some point in space and time. In the same place that the Unkindled One found Eudix Gunder with a coiled sword embedded in his chest, the Ashen Judge stands again. This time, however, he is not laboring from being impaled by a sword, nor is he afflicted with the pus of man. Instead, in this realm, he is called Champion, and not Eudix or Judge. But all signs indicate that which he is a champion of now is beyond his reach. What he found as he worked to achieve what he believed in was not but a dark world, a shrine without fire, and a bell of awakening that would not toll. But his fate as the eternal judge of the Unkindled had not yet been sealed. All the same, he is but another heir of fire, who failed to perform his duty for one reason or another. And, as with all other heirs, he meets his end at the hands of the Unkindled Ash. The path to Firelink Shrine, beyond Gunder's arena, is also eerily similar to that which the Unkindled One traversed at the start of their quest. But it is now teeming with black knights that patrol the many twisting walkways. Beyond them, however, lies the final bit of this mirror realm's similarities. A Firelink Shrine where the central flame has long since gone out. In this dark and alternate version of Firelink Shrine, the Unkindled One stumbles upon a very peculiar discovery: the eyes of the first Firekeeper. They collect these eyes and bring them back to their own Firekeeper within their own Firelink Shrine. The Firekeeper explains to the Unkindled One that it is forbidden for Firekeepers to have eyes, and that these eyes they're presenting to her will reveal frightful images of betrayal, reveal a world without fire. The Unkindled One, however, does wish for a world without fire, for a ceasing of the linking of the flame, perhaps learned and understood from the lessons taught in the painted world of Ariandel. The Firekeeper agrees with them and agrees to help, though they should keep it a secret until the day of their grand betrayal. The Firekeeper then tells the Unkindled One that should they change their mind, to kill her and strip the eyes from her person, so that she won't be seduced by the dark. She continues to tell them that the eyes reveal a vast stretch of darkness, a world without fire. But it's not the same darkness she sees when stripped of her vision. That in the far distance of this dark, she senses the presence of tiny flames, like embers left by lords of cinder past. The unkindled one, whatever their choice, still has more of their journey to embark on. So they and the firekeeper place the ashes of the lords of cinder upon their thrones, and the firekeeper begins her ritual to open the way to the kiln of the first flame. The ritual complete, the growing of disparity of a final encounter looming just past the horizon. The chosen ash presenting themselves to the end of all things, the dark firelink, the sudden flash-fried corpses staining about. But curious is the unkindled one that another bonfire twinkles in their sight. Ignite the flame, and thus they are given to an ulterior end. Something strange perches the ashen one's hands. Soot and heavy, the dragging and sinking feeling. Sludge, not through swamp, but ash itself. An old hag pilgrim, curious as to who and how they are here. But no matter of her. She sells just a small tool for them to be on their way. Into the drag heap, both the space and time, where everything is ending and everything is converging. Parts of Londor, Lordran, and Lothric seem to twist and turn, combine and feverishly mix. This is the place where we find it all. Past, present, and future, boiling around one another to the exact point when a version of Armageddon has reached its epitome. The drag heap is where the sediment of souls culminate, when both a person hollows completely and loses every ounce of humanity. We also know that the creatures existing in this area of the world are made up of these soul dregs, which are also the things collected as the Aldrich Faithful Covenant. We also know that these creatures might have relation to the Devourer of Gods himself. As an Aldrich Faithful, they would collect soul dregs from trespassers for the Archdeacon. These soul dregs are the very bottom, the thing left behind after the soul's power is gone. The unkindled ash pushes forward, guided by the remnants that Gale has left behind, leaving a safe spot to plunge further down. Below they find creatures born of the dark. These creatures are dregs in human form, facilitating the instinctual purpose to devour those with humanity. Pushing forward, the unkindled one finds themselves standing in the ruins of an old firelink shrine, where two demon princes bar the path forward. After the demon's defeat, the hero, the usurper, chosen ash, brings forth a banner to summon the winged demons, the very same that ushered the chosen undead from Sin's fortress to Anor Londo, to take them to a distant castle keep, a city built upon cliff's edge, a focal of swirling ash, the ringed city. In all of its might and construct, one would seem that it is a grand line of construction. Yet, that isn't its purpose. Its very nature is a prison to keep something hidden. The Unkindled One has not a thought of what that is, only that Gale is the one searching for it here, for he has led them to this place. The entrance to the ringed city is only a momentary display of one's own thoughts. In the distance the bells toll. The judge and executioner stand calling upon the spirits of those who fell in his defense. The Unkindled One, making their way through the ringed city, each new area seemed to be leaps and bounds further into time. With each passing step, the deep and the abyssal creatures seem not afraid, but hungry, and the judges and ringed knights act as patrol. The Unkindled One would find more of the area containing sunken churches and locusts. It seemed to come from the sludge, as if it were home to them. That's when they hear it, the deafening cry, the wind from beating wings, the ear-shattering roar of a grand ancient dragon, Midir. Before the future fall, before the first relinking of the flame, existed a war. A grand war against the ancient dragons spanned many years. Until one day, a traitor among the dragons came to a fearful self-claimed god and offered to end the war in his favor, and thus the fall of the ancient dragons. This dragon, this betrayer, Seath, was granted a dukedom and was given free reign over the libraries, and thus began the experiments to give birth to another life, the first half-breed, taken, feared by the power of Life Hunt. The next given shape, a failure but useful, given to the court, became a valiant warrior, Shira, the woman who became a friend of Midir, daughter of the Duke, the one who entered the dark room with a renegade pygmy impaled upon her halberd, another who reached the end. Friend of Midir, the dragon presented by the Duke to Lord Gwyn in the form of an egg. Midir, a mighty ancient dragon, one of the last, given a task to fight the abyss as the perfect guard. Midir did his job faithfully for ages on end, and had a single friend that he cherished. But even here at the world's end, would eventually become corrupted. Shira was known as the last line of the spear of the church to protect Gwyn's youngest daughter, Filianor, that he had offered to the Ring City many ages ago. The Unkindled One returns to his travels after meeting with Shira and again with Midir upon a cliff, fighting through the dregs and the deep that seemed to overwhelm the area. The dark is lonely here. little creatures nipping and nibbling in the dark. The Unkindled One had found the quarry Shira had asked of them. The ancient dragon, Midir, lost and corrupted to the dark, to the deep, lost to the same thing he was meant to fight back. Not unlike the tale of Artorias. This tells the Unkindled One everything. Nothing is there to hold it back. Nothing can truly stop the abyss, stop the dark from swallowing everything. Deer's job is done, and the Unkindled One charges forth, determined to rid the dragon of its eternal duty. And what are we? Little embers clinging to life. Not because we exist to lay the foundation of an old era, but as we lead one to a new dawn, a new era. Finally, in a tower upon the peaks of the ringed city, the Unkindled One finds a sleeping woman. Filianor, the youngest daughter of Gwyn, guardian of the End, sleeping endlessly upon her throne of death. She is crying tears of darkness as she does not wake. The Unkindled One ponders a moment and sees within her arm a broken egg. Reaching towards it, the egg crumbles at the lightest touch. Filianor, in her slumber, shifts slightly, almost smiling that the illusion has become broken. A white light envelops them both, blinding the Unkindled One, almost as if a rush of time overlaps everything. As the light fades away, the Ashen One stands before the broken egg and a now dead and rotted Filianor. Her job and her mission succeeded and failed at the same time. The end has come. The illusion shattered, and the ringed city disappeared. The barren wastes of both ash and wind are all that remained. Barely a kingdom remains to peak above this ashen desert. Filianor is one of the saddest tales in this. She was given to the ringed city as its warden. She held upon an egg that locked away the pygmy lords at their thrones. She was ordered and given away to this task unfairly, daughter of Gwyn, to sit upon a throne of death, to sit and damn those who Gwyn truly feared. Here, in the now ruined tower of Filianor, at the world's end, the Unkindled One steps outside to see a vast desert of dilapidated kingdoms converged into the ash and nothingness. They see the shrill corpse of one pygmy lord barely clinging to life as they dragged themselves through the ash, crying out to Filianor for help, in fear of the Red Hood devouring their dark soul. The Unkindled One presses on in the direction from which this pygmy lord was fleeing, until they arrive at the ruined throne room of the pygmy lords. It's there that they see Gale, hunched over a corpse of one of the lords, devouring its dark soul. Gale had become a disfigured and tainted creature, thirsting only for the dark soul and perhaps power. He turns to the unkindled one and demands that they hand over their dark soul to him for his lady's painting. The unkindled one knows that Gale must be stopped and that he can go no further. So here we have the greatest and most tragic standoff here at the ends of the world. Two undead fighting over a sliver of dark, while the fate of the world hung in the balance. The unkindled one, who had grown immeasurably strong, would eventually overcome Gale and destroy him, taking from him the very blood of the dark soul. Some say Gale only lusted for power, and thus stole it from the pygmy lords. Some believe that he knew the blood of these pygmies had long dried up, and could never be used as a pigment for his lady's painting. And so he purposely led the unkindled one here to the world's end, and devoured the dark soul himself, so that his blood could be used as the pigment, knowing that only the unkindled one was powerful enough to defeat him, and then they would bring the blood of the dark soul to the painter. A selfless sacrifice, though one cannot say for sure. The latter paints the tale of a hero in an otherwise bleak world. The unkindled one returns to the painted world to find it almost fully consumed by the flame, and gives the painter the pigment of the dark soul. She begins to paint as the fire blazes around her, a new world, a cold, dark, and very gentle place, a world painted from the very soul of humanity itself, a bright beacon of light in an otherwise hopeless world. The unkindled one leaves the painter and the world behind to continue their mission. At the kiln of the first flame, the unkindled one defeats the soul of Cinder, an amalgamation and guardian of the first flame. They then summon the Firekeeper to the flame, and she takes the first flame from its kiln. And together they watch as darkness, a true darkness, descends upon the world. Yet, just as she mentioned earlier, she could see tiny flames dancing in the distance, embers of Lord Cinder past, not unlike the manner in which the tiny embers sparked into the first flame, not unlike the very fire that Gwyn and the others found their strength within, perhaps left to them in the same manner by Lords of Cinder past. Darkness settles, and all fades to black as the Firekeeper's voice rings out into the void one last time. Ashen One, hearest thou my voice still?